What's going on, everybody? This is Brian Mazique, and I have the pleasure to speak to Matchroom promoter and face of that overall massive promotion in boxing, Eddie Hearn. How you doing today, Eddie?
Doing good, Brian. Good to speak to you, mate.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is. So it's a lot of things, actually. Well, quite a few things I want to ask you, and it's kind of a little bit all over the board. But the first thing I want to talk about is Johnny Fisher, David Allen, that rematch, that fight that is coming up soon. I'm gonna be honest, man. Like, I'm not sure either man can knock the other one out because they both took some crazy shots in the first fight. So I'm wanting to know, what are you expecting to see in this rematch?
Yeah, I mean it's tomorrow night, so it's really captured the imagination of the British public because they're two kind of like real good, genuine guys that are very, very tough, always come to fight, always entertain.
Mhm.
And their first fight was a thriller. Johnny Fisher's kind of like a young prospect. Dave Allen's been around, fought some massive names. And most people expected Johnny Fisher to win that fight. He got caught around the ear and he's lost a lot of blood from his ear and lost his balance, got hit in the break in, I think, the fifth round and never really recovered and kind of held on for
Mhm.
dear life. But in doing so, showed so much heart and then came back in the fight in the 10th round. And it was epic. And I think, we appreciate those two guys aren't yet world class heavyweights, but do they have to be? I mean, we saw with Ben Eubank recently. I mean, those guys are world class in their respective divisions. Are they elite level? Yeah, maybe not. Does
Mhm.
it matter? I mean, and then we see a massive name in a big fight that's boring at elite world level. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
for me,
My
that
next
when you
question.
tune in to watch that heavyweight fight, Dave Allen and Johnny Fisher tomorrow night on the zone, you're going to get a thriller.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think there's definitely a place in boxing for great fights for guys and girls who have recognizable names, maybe even if they're not elite level. I mean, I think we saw that with Mickey Ward, Arturo Gotti. At the time when they
Sure.
fought, neither of those guys were real serious title contender type guys. We knew that they were both kind of past it. I mean, I don't know if Mickey Ward was ever on that level, but Gotti was definitely past it. But we were drawn in by that action. And I think Fisher, I mean, I don't know where Johnny's going to end up, but right now, the draw is the action.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe by both submission, they're not. Maybe they don't fight for a world title. But
Mhm.
I feel like sometimes in boxing, like those niche fights, those kind of specialist fights that a lot of the hardcore fans love, the man on the street who's just a casual fan,
Mhm.
he's not bothered about that, and he doesn't want to see a technical fight, and he doesn't want to see a guy fighting off the back foot. He
Mhm.
wants to see a war. And
Mhm.
your example of Gatti against Ward is probably the best example of
Yeah.
that, really.
Yeah.
Two guys that didn't win a world title or weren't going to be at that level,
Mhm.
still gave us probably the greatest fights in the history of the sport.
Yeah, yeah, it's a similar, honestly, to something that the UFC does that I actually don't care for that much, but there is a thing, the BMF title, which is
Mm.
supposed to be just about
Yeah.
scrapping and it takes away the technical aspects of it. But I think in this situation, it does fit pretty well. Now you made a comment, and I think I know what you were referencing. I was in Times Square for the fight or the event. And so I wanted to ask you, what went wrong, what went right with that event?
I mean, firstly, you can't really be sure ever what you're going to get. All
Mhm.
right. You can make a great fight and the matchmaking can be good.
Mhm.
But really, a lot of it is down to luck. A lot of it is down to the fighter's performance on the night,
Mhm.
all kinds of different stuff. So, from an event perspective, like the build up, the anticipation, the sheer audacity of putting an event in the middle of Times Square, I thought it was incredible. And I thought for boxing, it was a huge profile for us, in the sport. On paper, I think everybody thought that was going to be a great night of boxing, if I'm honest. I mean, Barboza against Tio was a great competitive fight. Devin, with a chance to look good, could actually stop Ramirez. And
Mhm.
Ryan is vulnerable, but
Mhm.
yet he'll probably get hurt, but come through and knock Rolly out in devastating fashion
Yeah.
in a thriller. And then what you saw was a load of dross, really. I mean, just guys who, and I do think there's an element, I said in the build up to that fight, was like, there is definitely this behind closed door feel that fighters struggle to get up for. But you still know going into the fight, like that's what it's going to be like. You've got to overcome that and you've got to be professional enough. But I think there's definitely the element of fighters that are or have been overpaid.
Hmm.
And once you start making money, do you really want to physically put yourself in the trenches when your lifestyle is now fantastic?
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's what it is. And that's why, the great Marvin Hagler would always say it's very difficult to get up and do your hill sprints when you're wearing silk pajamas.
Yeah.
And that's why I admire guys like AJ and particularly Canelo Alvarez so much, because they're still doing it. But even now, I start looking at Canelo thinking, do you really like it is? I just think it's impossible to have the same kind of warrior mindset
Yeah.
when you made a load of money and now you live in that 10-bedroom house and you got 3 Ferraris and you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
hold on. Whereas other guys that haven't had it, I mean, look, Conor Benn's a great example. Like that was, yeah, he made a lot of money, but he's not been spoiled by that fact yet, and he hasn't really had any wars. And he's like, I want a fucking war.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I want a war. Give me a war.
Yeah.
Whereas the other, like, I really don't want a war. Like, why would I have a war? No, thank you.
Yeah.
And I guess going back to Fisher and Allen, yeah, they're going tomorrow night. I am prepared
Hmm.
to go in the trenches and just scrap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? How
Yeah.
many guys that have made it, had the titles, got the money, got the house, like, and I don't think that's their fault, by the way. That's
Yeah.
just natural. I
Human
mean, it's
nature.
just
Yeah.
like a tough game. And when you've made it out of that environment that you needed to show that toughness, do you want to go back there? And how
Yeah.
many times do you want to go back there?
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I had an opportunity to talk to Ryan. Actually, it was funny. It was right before the Rolly fight. So it was like 2 or 3 days before the Times Square fight. And I asked him, I said, "You're one of the few people in boxing who has gotten to a place where you've attained like superstardom, but you've never won an actual world title. Do you think that it's necessary at this point?" And he said, no, he doesn't think that it's necessary. He said he think it would be nice, but it's not necessary. So as a promoter, if a fighter shares that level of that kind of perspective, how do you handle that or deal with that?
I have a problem with that as someone that loves boxing
Hmm.
and thinks that legacy and titles are are really important post career. Like everybody got into the sport for that reason. You never, when Ryan started fighting, he never thought, oh, I just want to make as much money as possible. Like I don't care about the title. He thought, I want to be like Floyd or I want to be like Leonard. And I want, that belt. And but careers kind of rear off. If you're built properly into a world championship position, you become world champion and then you just defend it in all the big fights.
Hmm.
If you build a profile and then you end up taking a fight that, maybe a fight you can't win, or like he did against Tank,
Hmm.
he's got a massive profile and then he ends up fighting Devin for a load of money throughout a world title. Then he
Hmm.
fights Rody for a load of money throughout a world title. Now his next fight's not going to be for a world title. Then, but then I look at guys like Shakur and
Hmm.
particularly Boots
Hmm.
and probably Bam as well. Another one of our big stars.
Yeah.
They are all about legacy. Don't get me wrong; they all want to make
Yeah.
money, and
Yeah.
they all make sure they get the max.
Yeah.
But they really care about accolades and championships and unifications, and that's why sometimes it's more difficult. Like Boots, we're in a position now with Teofimo Lopez, and the money's great. We
Hmm.
think he smashes him. So does he. But it's like he'd almost rather take a quarter of the money to fight for another belt. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. No,
And
I
I
yeah.
love that. I love that. I
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah.
Sometimes
I do too.
it's a bit frustrating because you're thinking, well, actually, Boots, you smashed Tiafimo, let's just do it. And he's like, no, I will do it. I don't have a problem with it. But could we take, what about this one? What about this one? So I like that. But I don't blame Ryan for that because really, Ryan's a million miles away from fighting for a world title at the moment, especially coming off the defeat. So,
Yeah.
and he's also making a lot of money
Yeah. Yeah.
where he's thinking, I'm good, really. I'm good. Like, and you'll probably see him disappear at some point. You
Hmm.
know, go and do a bit of acting or chill out in California somewhere and just enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like it is from a boxing fan standpoint, it's a troubling take because it's almost like if you're related to another sport, it's almost like you're looking at, you're watching Premier League or you're watching the NBA and you hear somebody like Suarez or you hear somebody like Ronaldo say, well, at this point, I've made so much money. I really don't care if Barcelona wins. I don't care if
Yeah,
Real
yeah,
Madrid wins. I don't care. I'm doing this as long as I can if you keep setting up exhibition matches for me to play in, I'm good. The whole fan
yeah,
base is going to be like, well, then why am I watching?
yeah. I agree. Yeah, we
Yeah,
need to, the glory of the win and the glory of the achievement. All that's for me. That's the story.
it is. It
Do you know
is.
what I mean? And
Yes.
that's why I actually like the belts and
Hmm.
I like the unifications and I like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because I know that that's what fighters dream of when they start. All these kids we sign who are debutants, oh, I'll do anything to be world champion, anything, anything.
Yeah.
You never, if I said to them, well, what about if you just made a load of money, but you never fought for a world title? They'd go, no, no, I have to fight, and then, but he's probably also think sometimes the game, say, tarnishes him a little bit, but kind of takes their love away.
Yeah.
Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Sport. And I
Yeah.
think Ryan's probably in that spot where he's like, "Fuck it, I've had so much shit. I don't even like boxing anymore, but obviously it's great money. So what's next?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
And
can.
I
I
feel
can.
like Devin's there now, right? And Devin was never there.
Hmm.
Devin was all about belts, all about achievements. And then
Hmm.
I think the Ryan fight really disheartened him, the whole experience. And I
Yeah.
think now he just thinks, I couldn't care less about the belts. Like,
Yeah.
what's just let me make my money and then I'm done.
Yeah.
That's what I think. And then that's what makes you deteriorate as a fighter.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Because you start caring less about the craft. So you mentioned a couple of people, and this kind of ties into this my next question. And I've asked a few different people this. There's been a lot, like you saw this firsthand with. I mean, this was a major portion of the story with Conor Ben and with Chris Eubank Jr., fathers and sons. So
Mm.
I talked to Sean Porter about this, Tim Bradley, a bunch of people, Oscar De La Hoya, a bunch of people who their fathers were instrumental. How do you see that dynamic working? Do you think that it can work with a father playing a significant role in a fighter's life for a long period of time? Or do you think that it always gets to a point where it would be best if the father hand them off?
I think it's very difficult because you cannot expect a father to have a balanced opinion
Hmm.
of their son, and a lot of the time there's a huge amount of emotion involved.
Hmm.
Sometimes there's a huge amount of delusion involved.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, it really depends on the relationship. I mean, if you look at like Nigel Ben and Conor Ben,
Hmm.
since he turned professional, Nigel's just kept completely out of it.
Hmm.
He's been in training camps. He was a massive part of the last fight, but and by the way, he's someone that's unbelievably knowledgeable
Hmm.
and ad- ad- advantageous for us to have him in the camp with Conor. I mean, forget the fact that he's his dad. He's a
Hmm.
former two division world champion, great fighter, knows boxing, so but um like then you look at like I don't know, Tio and his dad,
Hmm.
or I mean there's loads of them.
Yeah. So everybody,
But
I think.
yeah, and you just some like Brian Norman maybe and his dad, and sometimes you listen to it and you're like, I know
Yeah.
he's your son, but come on, like, but you can't expect it. If I had a son that was, I'd be the same thing. I'd be the biggest supporter, the biggest cheerleader.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
uh, I think case by case, but
Yeah.
generally it's very difficult
Yeah.
uh, for father and son relationships to work in boxing.
Yeah, I see. That's beginning to be what I hear is the common theme from everybody from all different, even fighters are saying it.
Mm.
Deontay Wilder is coming back. What are your thoughts about that? Because I heard some things you said. I think after, so when it was set up where if he wins and AJ wins, then they were going to fight, and AJ knocked out Otto Wallen, but Deontay lost to Joseph Parker that night, and he's then since been knocked out by Big Bang. At this point, coming back, obviously this is a get right sort of a matchup.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about what's left with Deontay?
I think the fight's not really going to tell us too much, but just to get that confidence of a win.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if he struggles against this guy, he's got to pack it in.
Yeah.
But I expect him to win, but hopefully he can win well. And, we'd signed to fight Deontay Wilder. We were announcing it in an hour in
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia. And he lost to Joseph Parker. So, and then AJ went like that with his wins, but then he did get beat by Dubois. And now
Mm-hmm.
Wilder's down here. But if he keeps winning, maybe people can talk about that fight again. So it's definitely a fight that I don't rule out. But I think people don't give Wilder much shot against AJ right now, but hopefully he can start looking good again. Again, we talk about fighters losing their way. There's a great example.
Yeah.
I mean, he looks so dangerous now. No, it's funny how a fighter people can be so fearful
Mm-hmm.
of a fighter, and then all of a sudden have no fear whatsoever.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody would now fear fighting Deontay Wilder.
Yeah.
Whereas at a point, everyone thought, "Oh my God, this guy is the biggest puncher in the history of the sport." And now everyone wants to fight him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we shall see.
Yeah. It happens. It happens fast, man. Somebody cracks the code, or the
Yeah.
person shows a crack, and the whole narrative changes.
Cool.
All right. My last question. Manny Pacquiao's comeback seems to be on. He's going to fight Mario Barrios for a championship, a welterweight championship. Um, Talk about how that affects Boots, if it does at all, because I know that last time I spoke to Boots, he had shifted away from talking about going up to 154 immediately, but more started talking about unification. So Barrio, whoever wins, they're somewhat on Boots's radar. How does this affect him?
Yeah, all the champions on Boots' radar. I mean, I still think it's bizarre that Manny Pacquiao's fighting for a world title 5 years out of the ring and just not anywhere near at world level anymore.
Yeah.
Like that's boxing and it's the business and we understand it. I think for Boots, like we talked about fighters that want legacy, all he wants to do is fight the champions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think physically it would be more beneficial for him to move to 154.
Mm-hmm.
But he just, he's world champion at 47. So whilst he can still make it, he just wants to fight the champions. Now, obviously, there's a chance of potentially fighting Lopez. It's not a champion, but I get the fight. It's a great fight and it's a big profile fight. And I think the only thing he's concerned about is whether he can still perform.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't want to just turn up one day and underperform.
Mm-hmm.
And he feels like that's the only thing that's affecting that factor is the weight cut. So
Yeah.
he hasn't got many more, if any, left at 147. And whilst he's there, he just wants to fight the champions. And, he's a tremendous fighter. It's in a great position right now, coming off that performance. And he's got many years ahead of him. He's only just turned 28.
Yeah.
He's a baby.
Yeah. 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 It's going to be interesting to see how many, because I can tell by the way he looks at weigh-ins, it's tougher every time.
Yeah.
To get this 147. So I personally would like to see him go up to 154 if that's where he's going to be at his best. But that's all I have for you today, Eddie. As usual, it's a pleasure talking to you. And I thank you for your time. And I'll be watching tomorrow night to watch this banger.
Yeah, cheers, mate. Take care. Good to talk to you.
All right. Have a good one.